guys, it's Sam, and this is my August wrap-up. In August I read 7 books, but 3 of those were graphic novels. The first book I read was Witch Shadow by Susan Dennard. This is the 4th book in the Witchland series. I've already done a full review and discussion for this, so I'm not going to go into great detail about this because obviously 4th book in the series. But this book, while I still loved it, was probably my least favorite of the series thus far, mostly because I feel like I need more time to kind of digest everything. There was much more expansive lore and things that I found really confusing, and then when I did my review, a lot of people said the same thing. So I don't feel alone in that, but I do feel like I'll like this more on reread, possibly even like taking notes. I don't know. I always reread the book in this series before the next book comes out, so when the final book comes out, I'll reread this one, and I think I'll absorb it a bit more. But I did find this to be a little bit complex with some of the things that were going on that I felt like I wasn't connecting to as much, and there were a couple POVs that were also missing that we did have in previous books that I did feel the loss of. So it was still well written. I didn't attach quite as much to what was going on as I have in previous books, and gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Still love the series. Don't get twisted. Then I read If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy. This is the first book in a adult contemporary romance companion series. These books are all going to be loose fairy tale retellings that have plus size protagonists. So I loved that and I was very interested in it. And I actually forgot when I picked this up that this is a Cinderella retelling. And I don't tend to love like Cinderella retellings, so I went in a little bit cautiously optimistic and ended up really enjoying it, like that theme a little bit, because I thought it was pretty well done. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of how this companion series is done with that, because while this was a Cinderella retelling, we didn't have the evil step-parent or evil stepsisters trope. It was actually a very loving stepfamily that was really interesting. So the same as the Cinderella story, we do have triggers for death of parents, but those are off page. And there is some fat-phobic bullying, but again, corrected in narrative, just you have a character who's very like that. The story here is that our main character has just left fashion school. She's really into shoes, and she is flying on a plane to where her stepfamily lives, and she meets this guy on the plane that she refers to as Prince Charming. And then her stepmother actually runs a show, is the producer of the show that's kind of like The Bachelor. And some of the girls drop out of the show right before, and so they have to cast people, so they end up casting all the sisters and like kind of hiding that being a little bit undercover. And so she goes on the show, and who is the lead Bachelor guy? It's the Prince Charming guy. So this was cute. I gave it 3 stars, but I wouldn't say that I like particularly loved the actual romance elements, and I should have kind of known this going in because I am not a Bachelor fan. My mom loves The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, so when I was living with them during the actual like quarantine part of the pandemic, I watched a lot of the show just with her, and I hate it. I understand that people love it for like the drama. I don't like it, especially when it's the guy. There's just a lot of like gender stereotypes and like power dynamics. It just feels icky to me. And so I still had that like same icky feeling that carried over here, because you didn't really have the opportunity for these two people to actually like really get to know each other, and it still felt like shady because he's on the show, and like it was just, it all makes sense in the end, but it was still like, I don't dig it. But I did love the characterization of like our main character and like the dynamics with her family, and just how they twisted that story into something that was not just like a mean girl plot, because one of the things I don't like about Cinderella retellings is that it's just like bullying plot lines, which makes sense for the story, but I just don't like that to read that. So this was done well in that way, and just like the relationships between the different like women and stuff, that was cool. But the actual relationship with them, I didn't really find myself pulling for that much, but I still will be reading the rest of the books that come out in this fairy tale series. Hopefully there's a Beauty and the Beast. We will see. Then I read Star Daughter by Shweta Thakrar, and this is a standalone YA fantasy story about our main character Sheetal, and she is half star. So her mom is actually a star, like part of the constellations. This is based on Hindu mythology and folklore. And stars have been like outlawed to not be like connected to humans. Stars inspire humans, but they're not supposed to like be with humans romantically, even though they used to be. And so her mom kind of broke the rules and has left them years ago and went back up to be like a star. And as she's getting older, our main character, like all the things about being a star are coming out in her, like her hair, she can't dye it, it's like the silver color and the dye keeps falling out, she keeps wanting to sing, all these things. So she ends up accidentally hurting her dad using her powers that are manifesting, and so she has to go to her mom to try to get some star blood to heal her dad. And her best friend ends up going with her, and there's also this drama with this boy that she really likes, and so everything kind of goes from there, and they all kind of get tied up in this star plot. This was also my Bibliothecary book pick for last month. was it last month? It was the month before technically, but I finished, yes. So I was having some slumpy things. So this was for July. I finished it in August. So we have a lot of bibliothecary picks in this video actually. If you're interested in contributing to my content in that way and picking books that I will read and review, along with a bunch of other things like picking other content that I'll do. I have tarot card readings that I do every month. I review every single book that I read there on like an audio. There's a Discord, we do watch alongs, all this stuff. I will link the bibliothecary on the screen. But this I actually didn't realize was a standalone when I started reading it. So I actually was like, this is getting wrapped up like way too quickly and easily, and I did feel like that kind of happened. It also got like lost in its pacing a lot, like the themes and things that would just kind of get lost and muddled in what exactly it was trying to do, in my opinion, and there just like wasn't enough time. This almost could have made like a better duology. It just felt like there's a lot of things that weren't wrapped up completely, and I found myself just kind of not caring. I gave this a 2.75. It's not a bad book. It was just one that like I'm already forgetting pieces of it. It just wasn't sticking out to me. I thought the world building and like the descriptions and stuff were really lush and beautiful. They go to a night market and there's, you know, celestial beings and things that were just really cool, but I just think it needed more time than it got. So 2.75 stars. Then my next bibliothecary pick was to catch up on a graphic novel series because I'm currently reading 3 different graphic novel series, or I have been for years, and I wanted to catch up on some of them, and this was the graphic novel series that the bibliothecary voted on. I'm still working through it, but I read 3 volumes last month, and that was of Monstrous by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. So a couple of these were rereads, so I reread volume 1, Awakening, as well as volume 2, The Blood, and then read for the first time volume 3, Haven, and then this month I'm gonna try, or it might end up being in October because of the magical readathon, I'm going to read for the first time volume 4 and 5, and I think that's all that's out right now, and then I'll do like a full series so far review because it's still ongoing. But this is an adult graphic novel series. I say adult with like emphasis because there's a ton of triggers in here. We have body horror, like a lot of body horror. If you're squicked out at all, not gonna like this. Emotional child abuse from a parent, a lot of death and torture, and that's of both adults and children. A lot of kids, bad things happening to kids. And then there's also possession using like eldritch beings. So again, a few years ago, this would have been rough for me. Now your girl's on anti-anxiety medicine and I'm fine. But with all those things being said, I really enjoy this series. This uses Japanese mythology and folklore and storytelling mixed with like a really almost like neo-traditional type art style and a lot of just like eldritch horror type things all mixed in. Really cool. So our main character here is an arcanic, which means that she is a mix of a ancient, which are almost like animal type people. Like they're humanoid, but they have like all these animal traits, and then a human. So the arcanics are basically being hunted down by humans and witches and things like that, and their blood is being used for different things. Well, she is also wrapped up in a whole thing because she's a descendant of this like ancient powerful, like the most powerful arcanic there ever was, and those ancients are tied to old gods, or at least she is. So she is basically possessed by an old god. But it's more of like a, if you've watched the Venom movies or like the comics like Venom and stuff, it's that kind of like symbiotic relationship kind of going on, but still very dark, very twisty. But yeah, a lot of just like eldritch horror things. There's all these plot lines with like all these wars going on between the different types of people and all this like political machination stuff, like a ton going on with all these different power players in here and everything. But then you also have these eldritch beings that were like locked away in another dimension kind of, that are trying to get back in, and they're these old gods, and you see them sometimes because the ghosts of the old gods kind of just like traipse around. They're freaking huge, but apparently they can like come back, and they can also like inhabit people's bodies, and like it's just, yeah, there's a lot of creepy stuff that happens. But I guess you could consider this a horror graphic novel, but like this is as close to horror as I can get. Any scarier than this and I would completely know about, but this like a body horror I can handle. And like fantasy body horror, you know, kind of like Alien, that's like sci-fi body horror, but you know what I mean. So these are about that. There's also like magical cats and just a ton of really cool stuff, like steampunk elements to it as well. Awesome. Volume 1 on reread, I've now reread this twice in attempts to catch up with the series. This is always 5 stars. It's chunky and a lot goes on in here, and I just really dig it. Volume 2, when I first read it, I think I gave it like 4 or 4.5. I bumped that up to 4.75. Still not quite as much going on as Volume 1, and you focus much more on our main character story, which is still good, but I really like when we have kind of like a little bit of everything going on. on because, like I mentioned, there's so much political machination stuff happening. So 4.75, almost a 5-star for me. And then volume 3 on first read was, again, 5 stars. We pull in much more of what's going on in the world again, and then we just are getting much more backstory about our main character and like her ancestors and all this stuff. So really dig that. And just again, the dynamic between her and like the old god creature is just getting more and more interesting and just kind of like funny, and I really dig it. Also very queer. Mostly, no, there's a mix, but I would say there's like a lot of female-female relationships especially, but there's also some male-male ones as well. But that's also a nice little treat. And the art here is stunning. Let me like, well, you can kind of see from the cover that it's gorgeous, but let's go to like a non-violent page. I mean, just so pretty. It's stunning. I love it. So yeah, continues to be one of my favorite graphic novel series, and hopefully I will catch up on this in the next couple of months fully and do a full review. But I did catch up on all the titles that I did have, which was part of the goal. And the last book that I read this month was The Heart Principle by Helen Hoang. This is the third book in her companion series. The first book was The Kiss Quotient, so you do have some of the characters popping in from the other books in this one, but you don't have to have read them to read this one. This is following Kwan and Anna. Anna's our main character, and she is a accomplished violinist, but is also struggling with a lot of things about her music, and it is very quickly revealed that she is on the autism spectrum. I do believe all of the main characters in Helen Hoang's books are autistic or on the spectrum somewhere. I haven't read the second book, but I'm pretty sure that's true. But her boyfriend, long-term boyfriend, comes to her and says, I want an open relationship before I marry you because he's a douchebag. And she's like, I don't really want that, but okay. And she's like, well, if you go date other people, can I? And he's like, you don't like other people, like you're not gonna do it, because again, she has some of these problems with socializing, and she's like, screw you. So she goes on Tinder or something and ends up matching with Kwan and just says that she wants like a hookup one night stand thing, just to again kind of have like revenge on her partner who's doing this to her. And Kwan is the best friend of the love interest from book 1, Michael. So they run a like kids clothing design company together, but Kwan's all like bad boy looking but a sweetie inside, like he has a bunch of tattoos and all these things, and he's actually recovering from an illness. He had testicular cancer, so he's having a lot of like, ooh, I don't know about like my body and things like that, and just feeling like not himself. So he's on the apps in order to have a one night stand to like kind of get back into things. So like I said, they match, but then things keep happening to where they can't really hook up, so they just keep seeing each other and they keep like bonding, and then they're like falling for each other. Very cute. There are some heavier themes in here, so like I mentioned, trigger warnings for cancer, and he is recovered, but there is some like discussion of like cancer and things, and then also very detailed descriptions of hospice and death of a loved one as well. This was very cute and definitely headed for 5 stars for me. I really like their relationship. Kwan is super sweet, just all the things about like how they were interacting and stuff for the first 60 to 70% of the book was really good, and then it felt like there was too much getting thrown in, and towards the very end, I would say that the last like 20 to 15%, there was a bunch of like plot points thrown in and a bunch of time passed, but you couldn't really tell as the reader that a bunch of time had passed. There were just a bunch of things that like weren't foreshadowed that were thrown in that the characters were doing. There's even, also some like mild, again, sort of off page, but very briefly mentioned suicidal ideation, again, towards the end, and it was all just like not enough time. I almost feel like this book needed to be longer because there was a lot of stuff kind of thrown in at the end, which made sense for the story, but felt very rushed and very incomplete and just like a lot of like loose ends and stuff, and I would have liked that to have been more fleshed out. But I still really liked it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I might actually now go back and read the second book in this companion series, The Bride Test, and I don't know if she's doing any more of these, but I do really like these. The 2 books that I've read in this series so far have a nice mix of like this contemporary like rom-com kind of feel with autistic main characters, which again you don't see very often, and then the sex scenes are like fairly spicy. I will say that if you're a little like, oh, I'm not sure about sex scenes, this one's probably not for you. But if you're like okay with them, and I've kind of gotten to the point where I'm like, whatever, I'm so used to it now, that like there's some spice in here. Yeah. But healthy depictions of sex scenes as well, so dig it. But that is it for all the books that I read in August. So comment down below, let me know if you've read any of these books, what you've thought of them, and what books you read this month. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.